Hey again, everybody. So the battery died on my camera amidst the last video I was doing here. So I would have laced them together, but I figured I'd upload the first one and then go on with the second one here. And took a little time to think about exactly how I wanted to proceed, because there are a few things to cover on this aspect. When you're talking about environmentalism, it's funny because environmentalism, you break it down to, the environment, and that's your surroundings, of course. It wasn't really used as a description for nature as separate from man until, I believe, 1956. That's what I read. But before that, it was just used as one's surroundings. In general, your environment could be anywhere. The word environ, itself, I love etymology, or the breakdown of words, but anyhow, there's this interesting notion of separation between us and nature. And it's become more apparent over, obviously over the last century. The Industrial Revolution just changed everything. It made people reliable on machines and electricity to the point where, to a fault, to where if something were to happen tomorrow with electricity, we would all be screwed. If a major CME or, coronal mass ejection or solar flare hit the Earth's atmosphere and somehow messed with the electric grid and blew a few transformers, maybe it's no big deal. But if it blew a lot of transformers, we don't have very many available to replace some of these larger power stations. And we could reinforce our grid, and I'm not talking about just that, but it's an aspect of this where we really think that we're superior and dominant over the land, but we are utterly dependent on it. We're dependent on those rivers that run those generators in a lot of places. I live near the Columbia River. We've got 3 dams up there. We've got the Dalles Dam, and down here we've got the Bonneville. And it's a pretty big dam. Columbia is a huge river. I mean, it's the largest river west of the Mississippi, and I was kind of take it for granted living here my whole life in the Portland area. And after going to Montana last week and then coming back, I was just in awe at the gorge again, the beauty of it, the magnificence, and the fact that it was scoured out just a few thousand years ago by glaciers. And thinking about the Missoula floods as I'm driving through eastern Washington, and you see these mounds and ripples, which is still a theory to many people. But regardless, my point is that the Earth goes through some big changes. And we are right amidst kind of let's just say we're at a very happy point in Earth's history. The fact that the Earth isn't completely annihilating us every day is testament to the fact that it's been rather calm. And this is changing. Weather patterns are changing. The hurricane that just hit the Bahamas a couple days ago, Labor Day, that rivaled the other largest one from 1935 or 1939, which was huge, but it was also on Labor Day. And basically, I'm not one of these guys who's going to sit here as an environmentalist and say, look, these storms are getting larger, it's proof that we have to stop driving cars. But I also wanted to make it clear that I think that we need to work towards using less carbon and using less, basically using less fossil fuels, producing less plastics, and looking for environmentally friendly alternatives to this. And we are doing that. So it's not like we're just completely ignoring the fact. But like I said, when our nation maybe starts taking the lead, it doesn't mean others are going to follow, because many nations are still coming out of poverty. They're still getting their people up to any type of standard of living. And the sad fact is, a lot of them are running out of water. I mean, Chennai in India is run out of water. Several places are projected to run out by 2025, 2030. It's a very serious crisis, and it's going to cause a mass migration. But the fact that we're draining groundwater away. Now, picture this. I wanted to clarify this before I went on. When I talked about the Sahara and how we could have caused it to become a desert, a lot of folks may doubt that. I would urge you to look into it, because it's very interesting. There were 3 huge lakes, and the whole area was jungle 8,000 years ago. And at that time, many people lived there, but some of the dunes are 150 feet deep. We can't see what's underneath them yet. And we probably won't, we're slowly revealing this history that was probably buried because of the fact that if we burn down a few forests, all you have to do is divert and irrigate a few channels away from the river, and then a few more and a few more. And pretty soon you've drained the river of its ability to replenish the forest down the way, and then those trees can't transpire. They can't release their terpenes, which attract, moisture, which causes rain droplets, which forms clouds. Once the forests are gone, there are no clouds in the sense that there used to be. The monsoons will stop coming inland. And so I'm betting during that time, it was probably somewhat like today. We were doing our best to survive. We didn't even have the same technology we have today, but we're still able to destroy the planet to the extent where we basically ruined our own environment. This happened over and over in many cultures. And the reason why I'm focusing on this so much is because of how important it is. That we realize that it's not just our modern technology. It's not just burning fossil fuels. It's not, and it's not at all our whaling. And when you think of environmentalism, a lot of people think of Greenpeace or, environmental terrorism, where people are burning tractors that are cutting down forests. That's not the right way to get things done. It's because people live in houses, and houses require wood. It's either that or plastic or metal, and it's difficult for us to live because we can't just kill each other off. Well, some are trying, but it's important that we look at this rationally, because there are a lot of people. Since I was born, there are twice as many people on this planet. So just since I was born, and I'm 43 years old. And if you think about that, usually when an animal becomes overpopulated, the environment in which it lives will find a way to kill and thin the herd. In other words, this happens, for example, with acacia trees in Africa. And a certain animal, I can't recall, eats these acacia trees and the bark off of them, I guess, or the leaves. And they found that a whole bunch of animals were dying in one area, in a nature preserve, but not in another. And they did all this research, and I won't bore you with the details, but in the end they found out that one group of acacia trees was producing a toxin which slowed the digestion of the animals that were eating the leaves, and basically they died from starvation because they couldn't process food anymore. The plant did that because there were too many animals in this one preserve, and they found that through looking at the evidence, indeed, they were there were several different groups, and some of them had been, let's just say overpopulated in the area. And they found out that indeed these acacia trees do produce a toxin. Not just that, but trees can communicate by sending their information downwind or through the mycelial network to other plants and fungi to tell the other plants to watch out for these predators. And I spent a long time kind of defining how I feel like nature is intelligent, but the thing is, I believe the earth can self-correct. When something happens in the environment, it can self-correct. But some of the solutions that we've presented to try to fix, let's just say global warming for one, I'd like to go through some of the most, some of the wildest ideas that I've heard, and I'm not being cynical here. I'm not trying to insult anyone who's spending a lot of time and money and resources on this, but I believe it's the wrong approach. One example was dumping sand on glaciers, reflective sand, in order to stop the glaciers from melting. And I thought, I saw a show where they were actually driving these tractors over the glaciers to try to stop them from melting and putting sand on them. Now, I don't know what to think about this. I'd have to look at the math to see how much it costs to ship up the sand on barges and then distribute it with a vehicle that runs on fossil fuels. But there's a guy up there doing it. Another one was to put the sand on the seafloor. Same thing, to reflect light. I mean, these are actual ideas that people are proposing to try to slow global warming, even though we're kind of stuck in the fact that nothing's going to really... And once again, I'm not being too cynical here. I'm just trying to go through it. Geoengineering is another one, and I shouldn't even go into that at all because that's where chemtrail conspiracy came from. Believe me, I've been hearing about chemtrails for 20 plus years, and I understand cloud seeding, I understand barium and aluminum and how they could be used to reflect sunlight, as well as the Anunnaki theory of gold being sprayed in the atmosphere by ancient aliens. All of this basically doesn't really help us to understand, is it a possible way to curb global warming? It's probably not the best for humans to interfere by spraying aerosols in the atmosphere. So I don't think that's a good idea. Carbon scrubbers are the next one. You've probably seen shows where they show these giant contraptions, theoretical contraptions with all these fans that pull carbon out of the air, and people are adamant about these things. I just don't believe that it's going to do enough. I really don't think carbon scrubbers are the way. Not only that, then you have to figure out what to do with the carbon. And they're talking about pumping it down into wells, into fracking wells or oil wells. People have some interesting ideas about this. But what we're ignoring is the fact that you can pump all the carbon you want into the ground. It will come back out eventually. And this is what's happening up north in the wet, well, let's just say it used to be the tundra. Frozen carbon sink is basically what it is, just a carbon sink. It just stores, millions of years worth of carbon in these peat bogs, which can be like, so damn deep. Now they're melting, and all that carbon's coming up and releasing as carbon dioxide. So we're not just fighting the carbon dioxide we're putting out, but also the glacial melt is causing the runaway greenhouse effect, which basically, not a runaway greenhouse, but it's like a, what do they call it? One thing happens and then it makes it worse and worse, and the projections of where we're at are worse than we thought they were. So another idea I heard is pumping iron into the sea to feed the plankton. Because plankton, and I'd like to say this, right now with Brazil's rainforest burning, there's a lot of misinformation going around about how much oxygen it produces. They say the rainforest in Brazil produces, or the rainforest in South America is 20% of the Earth's oxygen supply. That is absolutely not true. Not true at all whatsoever. The Earth, in fact, from what I've understand after my research, the Brazilian, at least a huge percentage of the Brazilian, rainforest oxygen that's produced is reused right there within that area. Most of at least half, I believe, of the Earth's oxygen is produced by plankton. So the idea is feed the plankton in the ocean, and then they will, multiply. I can't say if this is a good or a bad idea, but I feel like just dumping huge amounts of iron in the ocean isn't really the solution. Apparently they can utilize that. I'd have to look more into that one. Let's just say planting trees is one. And I honestly have nothing against planting trees. I love trees. I plant trees in my backyard whenever I can. I have these ideas of, growing seeds from the maple tree next door and then putting them out in the woods. If we're doing it just to promote local trees, that's fine. But if a person really thinks that planting trees can actually help clean the environment, carbon, and offset any carbon emissions whatsoever, I'm not trying to break your heart, but it turns out that, and this is of course just statistical analysis, and I can't be sure, apparently in order for us to plant enough trees to offset our carbon emissions right now, we'd have to plant an area of trees the size of Canada every year. And there's just not enough room for it. So yes, plant trees locally, but don't think that's going to help deforestation. And like I said, the earth will recover, new forests will form, old forests will die. We can't tell if it's our fault or others' fault, but I think it's important to go over these supposed solutions. One of the solutions I heard was painting houses white. Seriously. Another one was to plant pale crops or lighter colored crops to reflect more sunlight. Another one was to lay out reflective sheets in the desert. I mean, all of these sound like noble attempts. You don't want to say, holy shit, that's dumb, but you're like, maybe it would help a little. I don't know. But I'm not an expert on this. I'm just giving you what I found out. I'm sharing my research. People even have an idea of giant space mirrors. Space mirrors to reflect sunlight. Apparently, they'd have to be 1.6 million square kilometers in order to make that happen. So that would be a little difficult of a feat. Maybe it's possible. I mean, I don't know. But so far, the Dyson sphere and many of these other energy capturing ideas, they make great science fiction, but we're not going to put out a million square kilometer mirror in space. So why even go into it? And why do people spend so much time on these things? I don't know, but I think it's because we have a desperate desire to do something. We're trying to come up with anything we can. But the idea that we can stop driving, or that we're going to, is really, kind of ridiculous. The idea that recycling is going to save the planet. I recycle everything. I feel so guilty if I don't recycle, every little can, every soda can, every beer can, every tuna can, every little plastic bottle. I feel so bad if I have to throw it in the garbage. Rarely do it. Maybe if I'm camping and in a spot where I just can't carry everything. But I also know that recycling isn't being taken by China anymore, who used to take our garbage and recycling. And most of it's stacking up and being dumped in the landfill. Very small amount of our actual recycling is being recycled now. And it's partially, the funny thing is, they blame it on us, the people. They say, oh, well, people aren't separating their recycling good enough, so, we're not going to be able to sell it anymore, and nobody wants it. It's bullshit, It's like, it's always the people's fault, just like with cars. When they blame us for driving, when they blame us for leaving our lights on too long, or not using energy efficient light bulbs that cost $5 each. You have to realize that even as an environmentally savvy and sound mind, you can also say bullshit to things and say, my small amount of electrical use here is nothing compared to, the waste that huge industries have. I mean, they have a monopoly on power. They're able to get it for cheaper in large quantities. Things like, let me give you an example, the Large Hadron Collider in Geneva, Switzerland. Yeah, they're finding the Higgs boson. Wow, they're finding particles. That's what they want to do. Do you know how much power it takes to run that thing? That's fine, as long as we're honest with the fact that we waste a lot of energy that we could otherwise use for better purposes. I'd like to also give this one thought. I don't know, people have some interesting ideas about what we can do, and I'm not here to disrespect that. Another idea is somebody wanted to add calcium carbonate to the ocean, make it more acidic. Somebody else wanted to actually stop farming. It was like a joke, but half joke kind of. The point is that we're blaming the people for, the individual lifestyle, for what the corporations are doing to our planet, for what companies like Monsanto have done. And let me say, I've had some hate from talking shit about Monsanto. People are like, GMOs are going to save the world, man. What are you talking about? And half the time it's really hard to know if it's a troll or a shill for Monsanto on the video that I made, or if it's a person who actually really believes that Monsanto has anyone's best interest at heart. Everything has become about profit. It's not just them. It's the tobacco companies who are spraying 600 plus chemicals on your cigarettes and convincing you that it's, not going to kill you all the way through the 50s, 60s, 70s until finally they had to pay a $125 billion lawsuit or something over a period of years, which is nothing. The pharmaceutical industry, OxyContin, and the Sackler family, who just got sued for a huge amount of money, and now they're talking about filing bankruptcy. These corporations, companies which lie to us and which abuse not just the environment but our personal, I guess we expect more from each other. We expect people to treat each other with respect and to be honest, but that's just a pipe dream. I mean, we're not going to get honesty from everyone, and that's understandable. I get it. So I've gone over all this bullshit, all the problems. What do we do about it? What can we do about it? This is a very difficult question. I have no idea. I guess in the end, we have to decide for ourselves what's really worth it. The metaphor, I guess, that came to mind just then was like the panda. This whole thing about saving the panda. Pandas are awesome creatures. They're beautiful. But they're dumb. They're slow. They're very susceptible to change in environment. And eventually the panda will go extinct. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't protect pandas. I'm going a different angle on this. I'm just saying we protect pandas because they're cute. And that people have mentioned this before, that, there are certain very ugly animals which play a huge role in their ecosystem, but people don't pay them any mind because of the fact that they're just not as cute or not as attractive or not as interesting. And we are suckers for easy information, quick and cheap. Like, okay, this is what environmentalism is. We fight against this, or we go out against whaling ships, or we, stop poachers from poaching elephants. All of these things are absolutely important. Nothing has disgusted me more than seeing an elephant with his tusks ripped out of his head while he's still alive. Believe me, I get it, and I'm not dismissing environmentalism or saying we shouldn't. Absolutely attack whatever angle we find important. And the beauty is that some people are interested in pandas, some people it's whales, some people it's apes, some people it's monkeys. There are a lot of different interests, but there are also people protecting insects, protecting bacteria, the flora, the fauna, the ocean creatures, the mussels, the coral reefs, which most people never see, which are dying at a rate that's just disturbing. We are honestly living through, according to my own research, the sixth great extinction, the sixth mass extinction. And from what I've read and from what I've seen in core samples and soil samples, that we go through some major crises regularly on this planet. Major upheavals, huge issues that we don't quite understand yet, but we can at least read the layers of the earth. And they read like, the tree rings, basically. You can go down and say, okay, at this time there was this cesium, layer of cesium atoms. Maybe this was from a fallout from a major celestial event. Maybe there was an asteroid impact, and then they can do further research around the world. And all of this is interesting, but it doesn't really help us in the end. It's almost time to go pick up my kids. It's always a bummer when you have to leave. That's good, though. I was just about done. And I really just wanted to give you some of the solutions people had, but I also wanted to kind of just realize that it's not our fault as individuals. We're doing our best. We're doing our best, and there are a lot of huge corporations polluting the shit out of this planet. We have to vote with our minds and vote with our dollars, and not buy products from shady companies or those who pollute or destroy or harm lives. And on a last note, for those who think that wind and solar are good solutions, I would just urge you to look a little further into this. I just went out east here in Washington. We have a huge, just hills full of wind turbines. You see them coming down on the freeway and driving out east on Interstate 84, and they've just, every time we drive out to the gorge there for concerts or for whatever, there's more and more.